Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Creator's Mind with Taylor, the creator of Legion's Realms at War TCG. And today's topic is lore in TCGs really all that important? And I'm a believer that it very much is. And as we're going to go into this in a little more detail, I do have to say that Legion's Realms at War was created based solely on characters and a storyline that I had pre-assembled. One that I had worked on for the past 10 years and built into every fiber of this TCG. So we're really going to break down here what lore means, what it means to the player, what it means to the people getting into the game, what it means for just the storytelling aspect of the cards and the set and the theme overall in a TCG. I'm a true believer in the fact that lore is a very important aspect because without it, you don't really have a direction. Your game doesn't really go in a certain way. You're just, at that point, you're just making mechanics, throwing a game at the wall and hoping it sticks. I really feel that lore is not only just a story and characters within that story, but it really gives you a cause, a purpose, a direction, and it allows you to really expand on not just the game mechanics, but it allows you to really get into the nitty-gritty of like how characters are developed, how the characters look, and of course making the card aesthetically pleasing. I mean, if the characters are not crafted to look appealing and the environment that this game is taking place in doesn't draw people's attention and doesn't attract their eye, then ultimately they move on to the next best looking thing. So I think that lore plays more of an importance in the thematics, the overall aesthetic, and the look of cards, and not just on the face value of what's written and the story behind that. I feel that there's a lot of games that don't include flavor text on cards. Legions is one of those because it was built off of a story and characters that have been with me for a very long time. Every card has a piece or a fragment of the story, whether it's a character and what they're saying in that moment in time, or some sort of legend or fantasy or some sort of story that is attached to the environment, the landscape you're looking at, the battle that is currently going on. It's another thing that attaches the picture, the image that is created in my head and put to visual by the artist. It is something that really ties in to the overall game mechanics. We find that a lot of our cards and characters specifically that have keyword abilities or certain card effects that really go well or mesh well with the way the art is, and that comes down to how the character is represented in the story. So I think that it can't be understated how important lore is to a game. Like I said, without it there's no direction, because then you get into the really the meat and potatoes of designing a game, and you get into the set development, and you get into how the packs are break down, the overall general direction of your set, what kind of mechanics you're introducing, what kind of card effects are happening, and where you are in your game, in the life cycle and the lifespan of the game. Without that storyline to guide you, your game is directionless. And lore really ties into all of that. Does it mean that you need a like in-depth high fantasy or extreme sci-fi or all these made-up names and places and stuff? No, it doesn't need to be a Tolkien like Lord of the Rings style story. It just needs to have rigidity. It needs to have viable characters. When people watch a show or a movie or read a book, inherently it's in human nature to attach yourself to a character, whether that be a character you like, an underdog that you're rooting for, or a villain that you just can't stand, but maybe by the end forms a redemption arc that in your eyes becomes a very valuable character to that storyline. It's how games design icons. It's how they build in a big antagonist, a powerful protagonist. It gives you the whole concept of the hero, the valiant fighter, the one that overcomes all challenges. All that stuff is based off the lore. It's based off of the storyline and the direction. You subtract that, and now you're into this situation where a lot of your set is misguided. I think that you're just throwing mechanics at the wall and seeing what sticks and what works. When you have lore, when you have that, let's just say, backbone in your game, you really are able to hunker down and decide the theme and the direction of each set that you make. And I think the theme is really important because it gives the set its own purpose, its own feeling, its own stamp in your timeline of development. It can invoke emotion, which connects to the player that is ultimately opening and playing with those cards. It resonates with them. It's either in a moment of the time in their life where they were when the set was released, where the society was. Maybe your theme is based off of what is what is now, what is popular. It holds a stamp in that timeline, whether it be in your life or in the game's life cycle. And the storyline directly correlates to that theme, because the set now has a theme, has a structure, and those characters and those cards and those landscapes and those spells and those abilities, weapons, whatever, end up having a tie. They're not just floating. They have a grounding base. They're based out of a theme, and that theme is based off of where those characters are and where the game is in its life cycle and where it is in the story. And ultimately, lore is the main root of all of that. And like I said, I don't think it can be overstated enough how important and integral it is to the base mechanics of designing a game. Because without it, you're flying blind. It's like staring at a blank canvas without any direction. I feel as though if you give parameters to people, to players, to audience, then you really get a chance to see how creative they get when you give them restrictions, when you give them a story to follow, and ultimately when you give them a character that they can fall in love with, that they can attach themselves with, that they can relate to. Ultimately we are all humans and we are seeking interaction and relation, and that's what card games bring to the table. And having that interaction with each other, but also having that interaction with the game and the characters, just immerses you more into the story, into the game, and it pulls you closer to the deck that you build, the big chase cards that you open, and it gives a sense of feeling, a sense of wanting. It gives a sense of being a part of something that is bigger than yourself. And so, like I said, that lore, that story, is so important to just relating to your consumer, relating to the players in the community, but ultimately relating to your game design. It is so integral, and honestly, I believe it to be a pillar of design, and I think it gets overlooked quite a bit. You always say that, this game's got great lore, but what about it? What draws you in? Is it just the story? Because I think when it comes to design, true stewards and true people who are talented by their craft really can tie a story to a character, and a character to a setting, and a setting to a theme, and tie that all into a set. And I think there's a lot of card games out there that really encapsulate that. And that, I think, is like one of those ingredients where you can call lightning in a bottle, because it's just it if you can make it happen and it just comes naturally, you can really just draw people in. I know in our Discord server, there's many people that talk about lore and discuss the different hidden things I put in, not just the artwork and visually representing the lore, but in some of the flavor text on cards and how they go together and how they fit thematically in the set. And it immerses you into that fantasy world and pulls the people who are playing it into the shoes of those characters. And I think it really just allows people to ultimately love your game more than they would have just playing it on face value. And that is how you truly build a fan, and that fandom, that following, that almost like a cult. That's why they call it a cult following in fandom, right? Like, and you build that connection through your characters and through your story and how they relate or how they speak to the individual that has them. So that's just the brief part of this discussion. I think we can definitely go into depth about it more, but that's just my thoughts inside the creator's mind. I go in to say it. Lore is so important to a TCG. It's important to any game, really, but in the TCG space specifically, I feel that it gives you direction, gives your game purpose. It helps the mechanics, and it really makes design easy. I mean, easier than it would just flying blind. So, but yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the next episode, or this episode here. So we appreciate you all for tuning in, listening, and thanks for listening to episode 2 of Inside the Creator's Mind with Taylor from Future Lore Studios. And we'll be back again with another episode. Episode 3 will be shortly coming. So thanks again, and listen to you on the next one. Bye, y'all.